Hello, this is Dr. Rahman Ali. Today we are going to discuss one of the important topic of relational databases or relational data model, which is called keys. This is a topic from chapter number 3 of the course Introduction to Database System. We will be discussing super, candidate, alternate, primary, foreign, secondary, and composite key one by one with the example. Let's first understand what is key. When we are going to define a key could be one attribute or a combination of attribute. And what is attribute? Student number, name, email, and phone number. These are the attribute. So any attribute which can uniquely identify one record, this is one record, for example. So any attribute out of these four attributes which can uniquely identify one record, we would call that attribute as the primary key. So here in this example, if we see this student number could be the primary key, because if we know the student number, we can know about the student name, student email address, and student phone number. Now, why we use the primary key? Primary key could be used for three reasons. That one is that uniquely identify a record. The second one is that if we have many tables, the relationship could be established between the tables using this primary key. And the third one is data integrity, which means that the data will not be inconsistent, and it would be reliable data. So these are the reasons that we need keys to be used within the relational databases. Now let's see, there are different types of keys, and if we want to number them, we have super key, we have candidate key, we have alternate key, we have primary key, we have foreign key, we have secondary key, and we have composite key. 7 different types of keys that we will be discussing with examples one by one in the subsequent slides. Now let's move and explain these keys. Let's first take the example of super key. So what is super key? The definition of a super key is that it is any attribute or a set of attribute, which means that a single attribute, for example, employee ID, employee license, employee passport, this one or this one or this one, or any combination of these attributes. For example, if I would say that this employee ID and this license ID should be combined together, and it will uniquely identify one record out of this. So this could also be a one super key. And it could also be like this: if I combine all these three, employee ID and license and employee passport, so they could act as super key. But if I take them alone, for example, this employee ID alone, this can also be a super key, and this license could also be a super key, and this passport number could also be a super key. But even if I combine this student ID with this student name, this employee ID with this employee name, they could also be act like a super key. So super key could be here in employee ID, passport, and license, because they are unique. But if I combine this unique employee ID with the name, it could also be super key. And if I could combine passport with the student name, or if I could combine employee ID and passport, employee ID, passport, and employee name, and employee ID, passport, and employee license. So all these are the possible super keys. One thing which is more important here is that super key is just a database design concept, and when we are implementing a database, we don't use it in the implementation. It is just a structural and database design concept. Uh, Here, one thing more which is important, that when we are defining the super key, we should have to consider this thing. A super key may or may not be minimal. By minimal, we mean that when we select the primary key, that should be the minimal one. If employee ID can uniquely identify a record, then why I am going to combine license ID with this one to make it a primary key? So in case of primary key, we will be focusing on the minimal attribute, but in super key, the condition of minimal attribute is not necessary to be applied. Now let's see uh, another concept which is called candidate key. So in case of candidate key, it could be any attribute which could act as uh, which could uniquely identify a record, which means that this employee ID could uniquely identify a record, this license could uniquely identify a record, and this passport number could be used as an attribute which uniquely identify one record out of this relation. So this is candidate 1, this is candidate 2, and this is candidate 3. So all these three can equally likely be used to be taken and selected as the primary key. Here, as we discussed earlier, in case of super key, the concept of minimal is not applicable. But here, in case of candidate key, we will be taking minimal. Mean if a single attribute, for example, this employee ID could uniquely identify a record within this table, then we don't need to take this one together as a candidate key. So this is the difference between the super key and the candidate key. Now let's see that from this we can conclude one thing, that is, all candidate keys are super key. All the candidate key are super key, but not all super key are candidate keys. Why? Because if you see from here, all these keys, these were the super keys. So in these super keys case, if I take this example, this one, if I take the example of this one, employee ID with combination of employee name, so this cannot be a candidate key, because by candidate key we take the minimal attribute, and the minimal attribute employee ID can act to retrieve one record out of this table. Then why I need to add employee name with this one? So in case of super key, the additional attribute could be added to the unique attribute, but the inverse of this is not possible in case of candidate key. Now let's go back to our candidate key. So in case of candidate key, now in this table we can see that employee ID, employee license and employee passport, they are our candidate key. Now what is primary key? Primary key, we select primary key out of the candidate key. When we identify the candidate key, then we out of the candidate we take one out of them as the primary key. So in this case, this employee ID is selected as the primary key. And for primary key there are two conditions, that the value within this primary key should not be null. For example, if you delete this 5 from this one and you add the rest of this record, the DBMS will result into an error. And the second condition is that it should be unique. By unique we mean that if I add 008 is another data in this table, it will also create an error message. So primary key is an attribute which uniquely identify a record within a table, and this primary key is selected out of the candidate keys. Now let's move and see the other. What is alternate key? Alternate key is that when you have many candidate keys, here I have 3 candidate key, 1, 2 and 3. Out of these I selected this one is my primary key, employee ID is my primary key. So the remaining two, this one and this one, they are the alternate keys for me. Now let's see other types of the keys. So these two are my employee license and employee passport are my alternate key. Now what is secondary key? Secondary key is the concept which is quite different from the primary, alternate and secondary key. It could be any attribute based on which you want to search the database. For example, if this is the employee database and you want to frequently search based on this employee name, so this employee name could be that could be repeating. Different employee could be within this database with the same name, but I would frequently search within this table to find out the employee and their passport number and their license number. So this employee name is my secondary key, and secondary key could not be directly implemented in the DBMS, but they could be implemented with the help of indexes. We will see them when we will be implementing all these keys practically. Now let's see the next concept is foreign key. So what is foreign key? For foreign key, it is necessary that you have two tables. For example, this is my table number 1, which takes the record of the employee, and these employee belongs to different departments. So I have 3 departments, BPO, accounts and IT department, and each of these employee belongs to this each of this department. So what is foreign key? Foreign key is an attribute. It is an attribute in one table. So take this department ID. This is an attribute in the employee table, which is the primary key in another table. Here in department table, this department ID is the primary key, and when that primary key is used in another table, for example, this primary key has been used in this employee table. Now in the employee table, this DID is called the foreign key because it's not of its own, but it's coming from the department table. So that's why it is foreign key, and this foreign key is used for establishing a relationship between the tables in a database. So this is one of the important concept in relational databases. And there are two conditions for foreign key. The first one, that its value must match with the primary key value. See, 2 is matched against 2, 3 is matched against 3, and 5 is matched against 5. And the second condition is that in case of primary key, if this is the primary key, so it could not be null. But in case of foreign key, it could be null. What does this mean? This means that if I go and register a new employee is hired. For example, 009 is registered, which has these name, but they have not yet been assigned to any department. So in that case, this place will be empty. So it is possible that its value could be empty. Now let's move to the next concept of the key. There is another concept which is called composite key. So composite key is actually a type of primary key. And composite, the meaning of the composite is that it coming from two attributes. When one attribute is not enough, for example, the student ID is not enough to uniquely identify a record, because this is the data. This table takes the student courses detail, student courses table, which keeps the detail of the students in student ID, name, course ID, course name, semester, and grades. So this table contains data from two different entities, mean the course, this is the part of the course, and this is part of the student. Now if I use student ID as my primary key in this case, so one student can have many courses. So and one course could belong to many courses. So see, student ID and student ID, same student ID is repeated. So it cannot give me unique record out of this table. In this case, what I will do, I will combine two attributes together. Student ID and this course ID will combinedly be taken as the primary key, and in this case, when I will be retrieving the data from the database, then it will retrieve me the unique record. So this is composite key. Now let's see the summary. From the summary we can see that this could be the primary key. This is our primary key attribute, and primary key is selected out of the many candidate key, and when you select the primary key, the remaining candidate key becomes the alternate key. And when you use the primary key of one table in another table, that is called the foreign key. And when you are using any attribute for searching purpose, that is called the secondary key. So how this work? First we identify the super keys. out of the super keys we identify the candidate key, and then we divide the candidate key into two groups, primary key and the remaining becomes the alternate key. So this is all about these keys, and next we will be uh, talking about its implementation in DBMSs, that how we could implement these keys in databases. So when we see from the implementation perspective, super key cannot be implemented, and candidate key and the secondary key, they are not directly implemented. Super key is just a theoretical concepts, so that's why it is not directly cannot be directly implemented in DBMS. Candidate key and secondary keys, candidate key could be implemented with the help of unique constraints, and secondary key could be implemented with the help of indexes. The rest of the keys like primary key, composite key, foreign key, they have the direct implementation in DBMS. Alternate key is also could also be implemented with the help of unique constraint. So the candidate and unique key could be implemented with the unique constraint, and composite key could be implemented with the help of index, while super key cannot be implemented. This is just a theoretical concepts, and the rest of the three, primary, foreign and composite key, could be directly implemented. In our next tutorial we will be practically implementing it in MySQL and MS Access. Thank you.